Hello everyone and welcome to the second semi-final of Pro Tour Magic 2015 here at Portland, Oregon in the United States. It is North America all the way here in semi-final 2 between Jackson Cunningham of Canada and Pierre Mondon of the United States. There's Jackson, the Canadian, in his first Pro Tour, and there's Pierre Mondon in his first Pro Tour top 8, just like Cunningham, of course. So we are away. Best of luck to both. Pierre Mondon kicks us off. And BDM, what are we going to see in this second semi-final?
Well, we're looking at this Jund Planeswalkers deck from Mondon. It's green, red, and black cards. It's creatures. It's some removal, and then it's just some very powerful Planeswalkers. On the other side of the table, though, it's a pretty straightforward Selesnya aggro deck, right, Luis?
Yeah, there's really not. It's not very complicated. I mean, it's a great deck, but all it is undercosted creatures and a couple pump spells. It's a Johnny's and Celestia Charms to pump your creatures, and then, 4/4s for 3 and 5/5s for 4 and 2/2s for 1.
Right. It looks very similar to the deck Pat Cox played into the top 8, but just, has a more streamlined mana base.
Yeah, the main differences between the two decks, the Naya deck that Pat Cox played and the green-white deck that Cunningham's playing, is that the green-white deck takes less damage off its land and has slightly bigger creatures at most of the costs, like Advent, for example, though Pat did play that in the sideboard. But the Naya deck, because it takes so much damage off its lands, gets to play Boros Charm and Gore-Clan Rampager for the combo, which does 14 to 18 points of damage once you +4/+4 and double strike.
There's the Elvish Mystic you covet so.
Yeah, I like foil cards, I'm not going to lie.
We have a new foil lover in the Hall of Fame this year. Guillaume Waffatapa famously likes to foil out his decks.
I can't even compete with him. I remember at Pro Tour Yokohama, which he won, 10 minutes after winning the tournament, he was at the dealer booth buying foil cards.
I did an interview with him about his first Pro Tour experience, and he talked about getting a game lost because he was busy trading for Chinese absorbs.
Yeah, I certainly believe it.
Fleecemane Lion comes down after an attack from the 2/2 Sunblade Elf.
And Pierre Mondon looks like he's short on black mana here. He's going to have to actually unlock it by playing Sylvan Caryatid, which that's the sort of stumble that aggro decks are well poised to take advantage of. The good thing is Sylvan Caryatid is such an amazing card that it can actually block Sunblade Elf if Pierre's not worried about our Selesnya Charm, which he probably should be.
Here
I'm not saying he shouldn't block, but
in come the team.
He does immediately block.
I like this block here, and the reason is that even though Jackson could very easily have Celestia Charm, and it's very bad for you if he does, you're so far behind that you can't win the game if you just don't block and you play around Charm the whole time.
Instead, Cunningham just decides to curve out 2-power creature for 1 mana, 3 mana creature for 2 mana, and then a 4-power creature for 3 mana.
Yeah, that might have been the best turn 3 play he can muster. I mean, a 4/4 is going to be pretty good against a Sylvan Caryatid and a bunch of smaller creatures.
Yes, when you put it like that, each one of those things feels unfair.
Right.
The 2/2 for 1, and then the 3/3 for 2, and then yes.
And the aggregate certainly is, because now you're a couple points of power and toughness above what you quote unquote should be based on normal Magic costing. So, of course, they are just a bunch of animals. That's what green-white decks are known for. I mean, that's their advantage, is that their creatures are larger. I mean, it's actually a good basis for a deck.
5 cards in hand. Mondon with 3 land in play now.
He found his black mana, or additional sources of black mana. He already had the Caryatid.
Another smiter in hand we see from Jackson Cunningham.
It looks like Pierre's walking the plains, like the actual plains, not... At this point, Jackson has no reason not to attack. Pierre is going to be casting some sort of removal spell here, but either way, there's no real reason not to just smash in with all your elephants and lions and the whole zoo's worth of creatures.
So now the Caryatid blocks, and the action is on Cunningham.
Block like that? Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, maybe it wasn't on him. He was waiting to see if there were other blockers.
And we see a Hero's Downfall reaching out to the Fleecemane Lion.
And even though Smiter is bigger right now, Fleecemane Lion ultimately would be a larger threat.
And a threat that's almost impossible to deal with.
Yeah, especially in a basically all removal deck that doesn't have very many creatures that can throw in the way.
So Cunningham lets that go. Smiter gets through unmolested. And are we about to see another Smiter as Temple Garden comes down?
Well, Cunningham has to really fear Mizium Mortars here, since a next turn of land plus a kicked Mizium Mortars would basically negate any chance he has of winning. The problem is if he doesn't do it, if he doesn't play the other Smiter, he's not really pressuring Pierre to the point where he has to, because then something like a Xenagos or a Vraska will just stabilize the board. So I'd lean towards just playing it, even though you're kind of putting yourself in a bad position to Mortars.
Yep, there you go.
Go ahead.
So do you have a Mizium Mortars?
Because I have
Pierre
played a
Mondon.
second Loxodon Smiter.
And a 6th untapped land, which is also, very much in question here. And given that Pierre's hand is a bunch of Read the Bones, I think that is going to end up being a very good play for Jackson.
Yes.
It looks like he is holding a Vraska.
Vraska being essentially, a 5-mana sorcery speed removal spell here, since Jackson can kind of ignore it after the first turn for at least a turn or two, but it's still, I think, likely what Pierre is going to want to play here.
Here it comes.
This is the last turn he has to tap his Elves and Caryatid before they have to start chumping.
And
So-
Vraska takes out the freshly cast Smiter.
Put it down, and that means Vraska goes to 2 loyalty, -3 off the start. There you see her on the right-hand side of your screen, using the middle ability to destroy target non-land permanent. Land number 5 now for Jackson Cunningham from Canada. You see the maple leaf on your screen.
And he's actually just 1 point short if he uses Sunblade Elf. He can crack over for 8, but not quite going to do it. At this point, taking the free kill of Vraska might just be worth it, since the Smiter is going to be lethal in 1 attack anyway. So if you kill the Vraska with Sunblade Elf, you can hit for 4 with Smiter. You could, if you wanted to, you could spend 5 mana and hit for 5, but Pierre still hasn't had an opportunity to use Mortars. It might be, not too bad. The more conservative approach would certainly be to just pass with 5 mana up, and at least Mortars doesn't kill your Smiter then.
This attacking that. That's attacking you.
So Sunblade Elf comes at Vraska.
He does decide to tap his mana there and get an extra point of damage in.
Yeah. Just playing with no fear of Mortars and hitting Pierre down to 4 here. So now the Smiter is lethal without Sunblade Elf's assistance. I don't know if you needed to pump there just because you're already threatening lethal, but unless Pierre has her Mortars right away, you're not in any way punished for it. This is like kind of half playing around Mortars, because you're not playing the other Smiter, but you're also not making it so Mortars can't kill your guys.
Well, here we go again.
I'm assuming that's a foil Vraska.
Yep. Yep, down to 2 again. The middle ability again. Destroy target non-land permanent again. And now it's just the Sunblade Elf for Jackson Cunningham. Planeswalkers are very powerful.
And here, Sylvan Caryatid forces Jackson to spend all his mana on Sunblade Elf if he wants to get by it. So Pierre can just block Sunblade Elf, and then Jackson wants he can pay 5 mana to kill the Caryatid, but then Vraska goes up to 3. I would still lean towards just killing the Caryatid. Eventually, you're going to have to do it anyway. And then next turn, since it looked like he drew, what might have been a Banishing Light, he can actually just kill the Vraska that way.
I mean, if you were going to activate your Sunblade Elf, what happens if you just send both the creatures at Mondon
And put him to 1 there.
and put him to 1?
It's pretty threatening. It plays better into a second Vraska there.
Right. He has to take the Vraska up that turn.
And ticking Vraska up when you're at 1 doesn't do a whole lot. Vraska's not going to get attacked.
So now Vraska goes up 1. So until your next turn, Jackson, whenever a creature deals combat damage to Vraska, destroy that creature.
I have not seen Vraska trigger in that manner for a long time. So Pierre couldn't cast Read the Bones here. They would fall to 2 life. Maybe be worried about Celestia Charm at that point. Also, just Sunblade Elf would become lethal. So
19.
In comes the Elvish Mystic. The life total battle has begun.
And Pierre keeping Putrefy mana up as well, which he might end up using, hopefully baiting out a Celestia Charm.
And you?
advent of the worm we see briefly there for Jackson Cunningham.
I like attacking directly at Pierre here. You knock Pierre down to 2 if he doesn't do anything, and then you can just go Banishing Light Nebraska, play Locks on Smiter. You have 2 threats out. They're both lethal. Even if Pierre has a removal at the end of turn, you're still in pretty good shape. And then you have Advent a turn later, which should really put the nail in the coffin against most normal draws.
And that's what he does.
Okay. Damage.
Thinking.
On the other hand, on Pierre's side, if he doesn't Putrefy here, those Read the Bones instantly just all turn off. And that seems like a pretty big drawback. I think you want to Putrefy just so you can then cast a Read the Bones. You're not casting the second or third this game, but casting 1 still nets you 2 cards with the Scry 2, which is enough to, I think, make up for the fact that you're Putrefying one of the smaller creatures in the deck. And you also even have Vraska ready to Putrefy, or essentially the next creature that comes out. But
Go.
given that Pierre's fallen to 2, it looks like Jackson is ready to cast Advent, which Pierre did, wisely hold a Putrefy for. So this is going to work out pretty well for Pierre. I mean, he's still going to be at 2. He's still going to be facing a lot of creatures, but given the alternative, yes.
Right. Context is king.
So Vraska eats the Sunblade Elf.
And now, deep in the game, we're looking at just an Elvish Mystic in play.
End of turn.
But not for long.
Untap.
Big 5/5 trampling Advent. In it comes.
Shrug, says Mondon.
No blocks, and then 1, 2, 3.
Boom.
Go away.
So the fact that Jackson's going to get to have a 2/2 Experiment 1 and a Locks on Smiter in play at the end of this means that Pierre's going to have to draw pretty well. I don't know what Jackson's trying to represent right now, since there's not a whole lot that gets around Putrefy.
Right. Can't be regenerated. He doesn't have his Johnny's Presence main deck.
But Experiment 1 into Smiter with a Banishing Light in hand for backup is pretty good.
Jackson Cunningham well ahead in terms of life, and at the end of this turn, perhaps just moments away from the lead here in the second semi-final. Remember, even Flock of the Slovak Republic awaits in the final with his blue-white control deck.
Even Flock awaits, rooting on Jackson furiously.
True.
So Jackson now looks like he's still worried about that Mizium Mortars. He's choosing potentially not to cast Loxodon on Smiter as a result. That could be the opening that Pierre needs to get back in the game. I still think Pierre is in a good amount of trouble, but not playing the Smiter does play around those Mortars.
It's interesting because that's the first time this game where when you've analysed and said, I think basically, even though he can fear Mortars, he should go for it, where he has sort of refused that opportunity. He's been bold thus far.
Wow.
And the Chandra is actually punishing Jackson a pretty decent amount for doing that, since the Experiment 1 remained a 1/1.
Yep, Chandra Pyromaster comes down, goes up to 5, deals the 1 damage to which Experiment 1 was vulnerable. So now what does Jackson do?
Smiter, and then you've got to banish him.
Yeah,
like
he's just
that.
going to play all the
Light
cards in
Dweller.
his hand at this point.
Go.
Little does he know, but Pierre's sitting on 3 blanks and Read the Bones. So Smiter is going to start eating mana creatures, from here on out.
Yeah.
Go to the bottom from the scry.
Pierre's road to winning this game involves drawing, a good Planeswalker followed by some removal spells into, maybe just a 2 or 3 lane from Jackson. That's all.
Better than a Revelation for 9.
Indeed. Oh, man. Now, if Jackson goes for it, he can just win here with Celestia Charm. It's obviously, somewhat of a tense move, especially since he's chosen to play this game conservatively at points, that I could see him not wanting to do that.
Yeah.
Instead, he's just going to attack, eat a creature.
If he's putting... The problem is Pierre has, now 3 cards in hand, and he's not played cards for a lot of the game. It's really hard to deduce what those cards may be. You can put him on 1 Read the Bones, but
No,
he's
Jackson's
just
going
going
to
for
go
it.
for it.
+2/+2 trample. Sweep them up. Jackson Cunningham goes 1-0 up here in the second semi-final. He leads Pierre Mondon by 1-0.
Mondon's got to walk that one off.
Yeah. You go away. So that leaves just Jackson Cunningham there at the table to begin the sideboarding process here for game number 2. Why don't we take a look at what Jackson Cunningham has to work with in his sideboard right now. And we'll take a look at that for you as he prepares. And there's only 5 cards in it. Louis said it was a pretty simple main deck. Well, actually, as the sideboards go, it's also one of the simplest in the top 8. Full 4 copies allowed by the game's rules of Cetessan Tactics, Unflinching Courage, and Skylasher, and then Ajani Steadfast from M15, and there you see a couple of Ajani's presents. So, Luis, only 5 options this time around. How many of those might we see in action in games 2 and or 3?
I'm going to boldly predict that he brings in 2 Ajani's presents and 3 Unflinching Courage. My reasoning being that he just played this exact matchup, and that's what he did. So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to assume he's going to board very similarly.
I'm afraid we're not going to see this card appear in this top 8, but I've seen him do some disgusting things with Cetessan Tactics this week.
Oh, yeah. Cetessan Tactics is an awesome card. I think, actually, it was even better in Pat Cox's deck because he had 4 Boros Reckoners in his deck.
Yeah.
And he definitely did some damage. Yeah, Tactics, mainly against Mono Blue. These decks are both very weak to Mono Blue in Game 1, which is why you see the 4 Skylashers and 4 Tactics. But Tactics is pretty awesome when the board gets gummed up with creatures.
Yeah, Pat Cox actually was able to use Cetessan Tactics on a creature his opponent had...
on his own Reckoner that was
Reckoner.
stolen by domestication to knock the domestication off.
Yeah, yeah. Pretty spectacular.
Cetessan Tactics, just for those who haven't really played with it, give us a sense of the kind of naughtiness you can get up to.
Well, I mean, you're giving your creatures this ability to just, reach out across the red zone and smack your opponent's creatures down. You don't have to get into combat. You don't have to, you're not forced, hoping your opponent blocks. It's just mass removal for green.
Yeah, the fact that it makes it all the creatures with even power and toughness compared to their opponents win the fight because they're at +1/+1, and all the smaller creatures level up 1 level to fight, and it's so cheap for 3 mana making 2 creatures fight. It's just an incredible card.
Value all the way then. Jackson Cunningham, we think we know what he'll be doing. The 2 Ajani's presents, 3 of the 4 Unflinching Courage. But let's go across to the other side of the table and get a sense of what Pierre Mondon is going to do. And like we said, you've just seen 5 cards available on the other side. Mondon has a full 9 to choose from. A couple of Slaughter Games, Pithing Needle, Mizium Mortars, Rakdos's Return, the full squad of Magma Spray, and then Singleton Abrupt Decay, Double Duress, Singleton Golgari Charm, Double Thoughtseize. Luis, is there any possibility that Pierre Mondon can do anything even close to as amazing with his single Golgari Charm as we saw Yuki Ichikawa do earlier in the day?
He doesn't have Scavenging Ooze, so it's going to be a little unlikely. Though it's a versatile card. You never know where it might pop up. I could see him, destroying a Banishing Light and doing something tricky with that.
We were talking to Jerry Thompson in one of the breaks, and he was saying that watching the Ichikawa match in the quarterfinals, that basically that Golgari Charm play was kind of sculpted round about turn 2. And that for sort of half a dozen plus turns, it was just, no, I have an opportunity to use my Golgari Charm. I'm not going to. Oh, here's another window where it'd be pretty good. No, I'm not going to. And then I'm actually going to do this unbelievable thing that almost no one saw. Tremendous. So what does happen then? If we're not going to see Golgari Charm madness, what are we going to see?
Well, we're going to see Golgari Charms most likely, since it still does, sweep the 1 toughness creatures away. Though I do like Jackson's plan of boarding out a lot of his 1-drops, and
right.
that does make this side, like boarding out Soldier of the Pantheon and Sunblade Elf, makes it, you can see the same situation when Ichikawa had multiple Magma Sprays and eventually had to double Magma Spray like a Fleece main line.
Right.
That's a really good, turn of events for the green-white deck. So I would expect Pierre to board somewhat similarly, board in Magma Sprays, Mortars, Abrupt Decay, and Golgari Charm, taking out, Rakdos Return, maybe some of the slower Planeswalkers. But in the end, I think that does actually favor the green-white deck. I think Ajani's presence is better than any card that Mondon's bringing in. and I think that Magma Spray actually loses a decent amount of its effectiveness. It really only kills voice at this point.
That sounds moderately bleak for Pierre Mondon then, who is currently sitting there having lost game 1. And it sounds like you feel it goes up further in Jackson's favour once we get out of sideboarding.
Yeah, I think, again, Johnny's presence has a huge presence in post-board games. It just counters spells for such cheap mana cost. And I think Fleece Mainline and Smite are just very well designed, against removal-heavy decks, just because they demand an immediate answer and dodge a lot of the removal that's out there. That being said, these decks are still pretty close together just because of, how powerful Planeswalkers are and how quickly they can run away from the game if they're unchecked.
So, Mondon 1 down against Jackson Cunningham. And will we see a Pro Tour debut player making his first appearance here at the Pro Tour stage, going all the way to the final? BDM, remember being terribly impressed with Josh Cho when he came to Barcelona and made it into the top 8 of that particular Pro Tour, won by Alexander Hayne, of course. It is so hard to make a top 8 when you've played 30 of them and have half a dozen PT top 8s behind you.
I do every year when we induct players into the Hall of Fame. I do profile pieces. So I've talked to, however many players it is, some 30-plus players who are among the very best in the game, the likes of Luis Scott Vargas and the likes of William Jensen and the likes of Wiegersma, Cornelison, and Finkel, and Buddha. And these players did not, for the most part, go to their first Pro Tour and suddenly find themselves playing on Sunday. There was a learning curve there. In fact, you see a lot of times when you look at the Excel spreadsheet of players' finishes, you'll see maybe a 300th, maybe a 40th, a 17th occasionally, but then you'll also see a gap of events before they even get back to the Pro Tour. So, it's kind of interesting to see, Cunningham being able to go this far in his first appearance.
Well, here's a case in point. We did a piece on Thursday evening with Jeremy Desani and Reed Duke talking about their fantastic seasons, and obviously we knew that one of them was likely to be the Player of the Year. Hello, everyone in the hall. I can see Nathan Holiday there watching the stream. Good
Ben
to see
Hayes.
you guys. Yeah.
How can you tell it's Nathan Holiday?
Because Josh Bennett's back here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And on the far left in the black shirt, Mark Tobias from Germany, Sam Black as well there.
Sam Black inching into camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Sam. Such a media guy. We're back here on the floor. Thanks very much to everyone watching there. But as we're saying, watching Desani, talking to Desani and Duke, looking at their numbers, Reed Duke's Pro Tour win numbers are not that great. They're sort of 53% because he spent so much time in the early stages of his career getting his feet under the table. And here's Jackson Cunningham, first go round, top 8, top 4, 1-0 up, close to a final against Flock. Incredible performance.
Yeah, I love the story that Jeff Cunningham told about Thursday night. Jackson's been understandably nervous throughout this event and had a lot of nervous energy coming into the tournament. And he's like, well, Jeff, I'm really hoping that I can make day 2. And, Jeff was like, well, I don't want to hear that. That's what everybody says. I don't want to hear, I just want to make day 2. I think we can aim higher. I think we can do better than that. So I thought that was, kind of interesting. And, and it's something about, I think you get a new player to the Pro Tour, even if, they somehow manage to connect with a large team. Maybe there's just not as much time for those players, but having that intense amount of time with Jeff, who's been here, who understands what you need to do to prepare for a Pro Tour and to get into a top 8, was very beneficial for Jackson.
Yeah, that definitely accelerates the process. I mean, first bunch of Pro Tours I played, and I really had no idea what I was doing or how to prepare. And, it took me, I think, 4 years from when I played my first Pro Tour to my first Pro Tour top 8. It's a pretty large amount of time.
How long did it take you to stop playing mid-range decks?
Well, about 4 years. So.
Yeah.
Though I'm kind of back because that's kind of how Magic works now.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
not universally. Like I did play a red aggressive deck at this tournament, but I played more mid-range this last year or two than I had previously.
All right, what do we think of the 6 for Jackson Cunningham? Looks to me, we've got an Advent of the Worm, we've got a mana. couple of land. The players are ready. We are away with game number 2. It begins as game 1 began, with a temple and a bit of scry action,
As all games begin.
Yeah.
as they should.
This is a great mulligan. Turn 1 experiment 1 and a turn 2 voice, with Advent in hand is kind of what you're looking for. And actually drawing that forest saved Jackson Cunningham probably like 4 points of life, because having Mana Confluence be your 4th land instead of your 1st land is huge.
Mondon will send out an Elvish Mystic.
Looking at Mondon's hand, I did not see a lot of red or black cards.
Yeah, he's on the all green card plan, which is actually fine because Courser of Krufix does a really good job blocking, but
There is a Putrefy and a Vraska.
well, there we go, because Advent of the Worm does a very good job at attacking through all the green blockers. Yeah, this is a pretty ideal hand for Mondon. He's got Coursers to kind of deal with the small creatures, and he even has 2. So if Celestia Charm, pumps Experiment 1 past the first one, that's fine. He can just play a second. There's no real risk to blocking. Putrefy for the first big creature, and then Vraska for the second big creature. Or vice versa, depending on how the game plays out.
And here's another Experiment 1.
Cunningham just sends the Experiment 1 into the Elfin trades. Here comes Courser of Krufix.
That's interesting. I did not expect that to happen. I think that playing Voice would have been pretty decent. He could have also played Celestia Charm to make a token and evolve Experiment 1.
Yeah.
But it looks like he's just interested in getting the second Experiment 1 out there.
Drew Fleece Main Lion.
I think that using a 2-mana spell on turn 2 and then playing the 1-drop plus a 2-mana spell on turn 3 would have ended up leading to a lot smoother curve for Jackson here. So it's an interesting line he took, and I think in terms of mana efficiency, it's going to leave him potentially with a few cards in hand that he can't actually cast quite on the same curve. On the other hand, you don't really expect your opponent to block with Elvish Mystic very often in a deck like the Jund deck, so it might be that he just expected it to not get blocked.
We definitely saw in an earlier match today, Cunningham just send his guy in kind of like, well, I obviously have a trick when he didn't have a trick.
Yeah, he attacked Voice past a Courser of Krufix against Ichikawa.
Yeah.
And representing Celestial Charm, and actually won because of those 2 points of damage. So, but sometimes your opponent does block, and I'm not sure if that he had planned for that necessarily.
Here is Voice of Resurgence. Counter goes on Experiment 1, of course. And Jackson will pass. Mondon goes to reveal the top card. It is a land.
And a black land that comes into play untapped even. So that was a good reveal for Mondon here. He's got a lot of options. He could just play second Courser and gain 2. Yeah, looks like the plan. He's not really under any pressure, and the 2 Coursers kind of brick wall Jackson's team here.
Oh, and he's got a Xenagos coming up.
This looks like it's pretty firmly in Mondon's favor right now just because of how effective all his cards are at blocking. It's not even that he's getting a huge incremental advantage. He's just blocking a lot. Though playing the lands off the top also does that.
You got to look at Cunningham's hand. Advent of the Worm on the left. And Jackson's going to send in the boys.
I actually really like a double block on Experiment 1 here, since a Celestia Charm still just, at this point, trades, you for a Courser, but Jackson still loses Experiment 1. There's no real drawback to doing that, and if he evolves Experiment 1, I guess he doesn't even have enough mana to play Advent right now, so double blocking the Experiment 1 seems like it leads to a pretty good place for Mondon.
Given that that's true, why would Jackson put himself in a position where that can happen?
He might be representing Celestia Charm plus Ajani's Presence, which would be a different kind of trade, and he might be looking like hoping that maybe Mondon blocks 1 on each here. No, this worked out a lot better for Jackson than it could have. I mean, this is actually a good trade for Jackson. Trading a Celestia Charm for a Courser is kind of where you need to start, but I think Mondon had an opportunity to get a pretty good edge right there.
3 in hand for Cunningham. You can see them on the right of screen. Double Fleece Main Lion and the Advent of the Worm. Mondon, meanwhile, with his Courser causing the top card to be revealed.
And hitting a string of lands off Courser is perfect. I mean, that's exactly what you want to have happen.
Right.
It's so funny
Dig
how
your action cards, gain some life.
Yep, the ordering matters so much, you know, when you've got a courser out. Like, land spell, land spell, land spell is insane.
And sometimes you can rig that order if you have some scry lands in there.
Now, Mondon deep in thought. Cunningham looking pretty much as he has throughout the top 8.
And Mondon has, again, a couple options here. He can play Xenagos to just put tokens into play and start blocking. He kind of doesn't want that voice to die because the token can eventually grow to be much, much larger, but you can't just let your planeswalkers get attacked by it. He's got a Caryatid. He could just play like Caryatid Putrefy. That would use his mana the most efficiently because he would use all 5. Could also just play Vraska. I mean, he can play any card in his hand or any combination of, Caryatid plus Putrefy, or even Xenagos plus Caryatid if he wants to plus Xenagos, though. I think that is one of the plays well, it's actually not that bad, but I think he can do a little better. I like playing the land
Takes
untapped,
one.
though. I think you're going to want to use 5 mana this turn.
He has another land on top of his deck.
Yeah, the land hit sequence is not as impressive. Voice also makes it so the Putrefied needs to get played at sorcery speed unless you want to give Jackson a free token, which he certainly does not.
Yeah.
So 3 black and green gets you Vraska, and then up we go. So should you come at me, I will kill you.
And this is the rarely used Vraska immediately plus, but it's actually pretty good here since it makes Vraska safe from getting attacked and kind of, preemptively stops Jackson's next big threat unless it's an advent. Whereas Pierre doesn't mind if he gets attacked. He could even just take it and not even block because of Celestia Charm and go to 13, and he would be in very good shape. So Jackson's still pretty bottlenecked on mana. He drew that 1 forest on turn 1. Other than that, he has not drawn a land this game. And a hand of 4-drop and multiple 2-drops means that he's going to have trouble really playing spells in the sequence he wants to.
Yeah, has Loxodon Smiter now.
Maybe Jackson's playing a sub-game of never take damage off mana confluence.
You may be correct.
Fleecemane Lion.
Attack, upgrade your Voice of Resurgence.
He could send Voice.
Go ahead.
He could automatically make Voice into a token by attacking Vraska, because whether it gets blocked or not, it's dying.
Right.
But I think it's reasonable to keep Voice back this turn.
Mondon with cards in hand over Cunningham right now.
Yeah, and because Mondon has been playing all his lands off the top of his deck, he's ending up with almost twice as many cards as Jackson here. He's built up a pretty large reserve of spells to play. This is Mondon's game. He's got a lot of ways to win this game, and I think there's a lot of the different paths he could take are very viable.
Take down Vraska.
So Vraska will go down to get rid of Fleecemane Lion before it can become problematic.
Jackson keeps looking at that Advent of the Worm in his hand.
Yeah, and he really wants to play that Advent, but not only is he not able to play it now, by the time he sees that Putrefy, and Pierre has, a second Putrefy in hand. So it's, as long as Pierre doesn't tap out, that Advent's not doing a whole lot. Ideally, Cunningham's able to set up an Advent plus a Johnny's Presence, but he's not only a 4th land short, he's a 5th land short and a Johnny's Presence short. So I'm guessing that this is not the game where we see that. It could be in game 3, but
I was getting quite excited there. It sounded such a lovely plan.
it is a good plan. It's just, one that it's kind of hard to assemble, especially given that he's 3 cards short right now.
Yeah.
Game 1. Scry, leave it on top.
You're at 18.
Yeah.
He just played the Akum Refuge from Zendikar. Going to play tap, red, black, gain a life.
Mind if I read your experiment 1?
Yeah.
So,
See, I know there are some
He wants
people.
to read the Experiment 1, but he should reread the Putrefy then.
yeah, and actually, in between rounds, Cunningham asked, he's like, hey, can you regenerate from Vraska? I was like, no, I don't think so. We looked it up, and yeah, you cannot. I looked it up afterwards after telling him that in fact was the way it worked. So
There's Putrefy on Experiment 1. I really like that. Can I look at it? I sometimes get questions from people who say, oh, why do they always like pick up cards and read them? Yeah, everyone knows what everything does. Well, actually, everyone doesn't know what everything does. And that's precisely why, especially when there's tens of thousands of dollars on the line. You don't want to not know. Just check.
Better safe than sorry is definitely the slogan you want to go for.
So Sylvan Caryatid comes down post, I guess post-combat, but second main phase.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of combat going on that side of the deck.
Experiment 2.
I think it's Experiment 3, actually.
No.
19.
Sorry, that was... Didn't realize I'd done that out loud.
Fleece Main Lion, and an Evolve Trigger.
Yeah,
There's a Mortars.
That's a pleasant surprise for Mondon and a slightly less pleasant one for Cunningham.
That's a Chandra he's holding as well.
Yeah, he's got Chandra, he's got Putrefy, he's got Xenagos. He's got all the cards he needs to win this game. He's got to figure out, how to best, basically clear Cunningham's side of the board so nothing fishy can happen. Here, I suspect, is the turn where he wants to play Xenagos. He can protect it with Putrefy. He can make a blocker. He can even, if he wants, just trade Vraska for, like, the Fleece Main. I could even see ticking up Vraska, zeroing Xenagos. Chandra does not have any appealing targets right now, so I suspect you're not going to want a Chandra.
There you go.
Get it gone.
So yeah, I like Xenagos, make a Satyr token, lead, and you have 3 blockers plus a Putrefy ready to go. And then next turn, you can go ahead and kick Mizium Mortars for the full amount, just overload it completely. Voice does make you want to play Putrefy now. Putrefying an Experiment 1 that's 2/2 is not super exciting, but might be worth it. I would lean toward just making blockers, and there's not much that Cunningham can do to get by you. He's not playing like the Naya deck that has Brave the Elements or anything like that. He's got an Ajani. Ajani could kill Xenagos if he plays it.
Yeah, he's playing Chandra instead.
Chandra Pyromaster.
0.
Looks like he's just going to
And-
use the opportunity to zero it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the Mortars reaches out to the Experiment 1.
This is exiled, so I'm revealing the top card.
Okay.
And Abrupt Decay will be on top.
So Mizium Mortars takes down the Experiment 1.
2.
And he's now able to attack with Courser of Crufix.
Yeah, and although it's only 18-17, that 4th land, the absence thereof for Jackson Cunningham, is just increasingly turning into the difference maker in this game.
Yeah, and I mean, Mondon has access to 11 cards right now, and Cunningham has access to like 6 or 7. So he's basically double the number of cards, and not even all the cards in Cunningham's hand are castable.
Mondon left with Putrefy and Xenagos in hand. There's a Smiter still for Cunningham.
Attack Chandra.
Block.
Yep. Caryatid blocks.
Damage.
And then here's a Loxodon Smiter.
Yeah, pretty free block, pretty free attack, but Smiter is not really going to fight. I mean,
Yeah.
even if Pierre had no cards in hand, he would still be handily winning this game. And
more Mizium Mortars action on top of the library.
And Courser Chandra, nice little combo. You know what you're getting into
Yeah.
when you zero Chandra, which is nice.
I've seen a number of really good interactions with Planeswalkers and Courser of Crufix. Obviously, Domri Raid and some of the Jund Planeswalkers lists.
Yeah, Domri is a very good combo with Courser.
Revealing top
They
card.
both clear the top of the library for the
Oh,
other.
okay, so
It's
exile. Right,
exile.
Right.
Chandra clearing the top for Courser.
playing 1 scry.
It gets to play a land off for the Courser, gets to scry,
I'll keep it.
keeps Dreadbore.
First one of those we've seen this match.
This is kind of like the Revelation, except the Revelation is happening in very small increments. where every turn Pierre is just drawing like 1 or 2 extra cards.
Overload.
Yes, Museum orders with Overload. Will be a 1/1 token left.
So if you would like to join the conversation, you can see on our ticker, you're very welcome to vote for who you think is going to win this match. And I would recommend basing your decision
Here you go.
on it being 1-1 in a little while. So,
There is a
land.
4th land.
Oh, joy, it's Temple Garden.
And yeah, that 4th land, a little late in coming, because now at this point, Pierre has both Abrupt Decay and Putrefy at the ready for any worm tokens, and Xenagos and Chandra ready to end the game. Slowly.
Yeah.
But surely.
Yeah, that's how
No, I
games
mean-
are ending in this top 8.
Yeah.
And in fact, Jackson chooses not to play his land untapped.
At this point, he might be looking to cast Celestia Charm in response to Chandra pinging the Elemental to save it, but then Pierre can just use a removal spell on the Celestia Charm token, at which point the Elemental also dies. This is going to be, as Ben has put it, a downhill battle for Cunningham.
So he does ping the token, and Jackson does nothing.
1320.
Yeah.
Here comes Xenagos. The Revealer. Crufix is the Revealer. It's the Reveler.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, boy.
At least Xenagos actually does escalate pretty quickly.
Yes.
Since, 2 becomes 4, becomes 6, becomes 8, and then that's it. It's added up to 20.
Have you seen games this weekend that just are entirely like Xenagos tokens just doing all the damage?
Oh, yeah, unchecked. I mean, it's just like 3
Right.
turns or 4 turns, so it is quite quick.
Here we go. Untap with 4 lands in play. Looks like Jackson drew an Ajani's Presence.
He's 1 land short of the combo. He's drawn the Johnny's Presence in a land, but I don't think it's going to be enough, even if he was able to magically have another land in play. One thing I do say about the Jund Planeswalkers deck, when it wins games, it wins them decisively. It is not generally like, eking out a win. Like this is pretty one-sided at this point.
You said that the Jund Planeswalkers deck was winning slowly but surely, and that's what it was doing in these little incremental +1 card here, +1 card there. Let's fast forward to a hypothetical world where Mondon wins both this game, which is not a big stretch, and then game 3 to put him into a final against Stephen Flock. Flock also likes to win slowly but surely. Who wins when both players think that's what's going on? It's much clearer when you're sort of, I'm trying to stay alive, I'm the control deck, you're trying to kill me, you're the aggro deck. When they're both planning, I'm going to divination. I'm just going to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Who's advantaged there?
It's really going to come down, I mean, Pierre is definitely under a faster clock against Flock, just because if Flock gets out 10 lands, he can at any point fire off a Rev for 7, then cast a Planar Cleansing, and that wipes out all the progress that Mondon's made.
Right.
So Mondon really has to use Xenagos and Rakdos Return to really reduce the amount of outs that Flock has.
So he would be the beatdown, as it were.
Yeah, though that can change post-board games. In post-board games, Slaughter Games makes that different.
I would like you guys to take a moment to appreciate the beauty of playing a Courser of Crufix off the top of your deck.
Yeah, that is some a good
I mean,
synergy there.
if he'd revealed a land afterwards, it would have been the most perfect. But as it was, Jackson was like, I can't win this. And